Well, shalomi homies. How you doing? I'd love to hear from you guys. I hope you're living ferociously for the kingdom. You mighty remnant of Yah, ferocious little warriors out there. How you doing? If you're feeling dejected and defeated and just like the enemy's been coming along and kicking your stinking teeth in, hang in there. It's going to get better. Fire y'all up with some fiery letters. You know, it's a firefight out there. Everybody's got their little cannons running full tilt right now. You know what? It's an exciting time to be alive. There's people who longed their entire lives to live in this season. Come on. If you think about it, throughout times in history, it's been pretty boring at times. Like, think about it sincerely. Take a pause. Comparatively, it's been some pretty lulls in the fire, but we're at it like full tilt right now. You know what I'm saying? It's never been more exciting time to be alive. I tell people that all the time. I'd rather be born in the times when the days are difficult and insanely outnumbered and outgunned and outfinanced and cut off and surrounded. That's good. That's exciting. Then we have an opportunity for Yahweh to like actually show off. You know what I'm saying? Like to really do something mighty, do something that's worth like remembering. To like, we should be seeking to live a life that's worth remembering, like worth being written down. How many of you have lived a life that was worth writing down? Just something to consider. Think about all the times that you've had throughout the entirety of your life. When, of any season in there, have you had a time in which it was exhilarating, adverse, trying, challenging, difficult, arduous? Those are the memorable times. Those are the times that are like worth remembering. We got chapters and chapters and chapters about certain people's lives that like zoom in, like hyper focused. Samson literally wrestling with a lion. It's like a young lion met him on the way and he tore it to pieces as one tears apart a kid. Think about that. He tore it apart like people tore apart kids. How many kids you torn apart? If you're thinking of little children, human creatures, children. They're called children, not kids. Kids are baby goats. Don't ever mistake it. Yeshua's going to separate the sheep from the goats. Don't call them kids. Every time people are like, how many kids do you have? I'm like, I have 4 children. They're children. They're lambs. Dang right, they're lambs. They're going in the sheep side of life. You betcha, as long as I can possibly help it. Oh, I'm enthused. I just jumped in freezing, ridiculously cold water outside. Yes, I fell backwards into it like a dead man falling out of a tree. It was exhilarating. I also got a lot of water up my nose, so I'm.
Well, hello. I found a spot with water. You know, I always grew up in the desert, and when I found water like this, man, I would get excited. I would get so excited I'd just have to go in. Well, it's the winter. I walked a long ways to go show you this, so hallelujah. There's glittery gold down in there.
Look if you can see that sparkling down in there, that twinkling.
Sure.
Can you guys see that real sparkly water, that all that mica down in there? Can you see that? I hope you can see that. It's so pretty. Oh, it's so pretty. Nice sand. That's my kind of sand.
Oh, so cold.
Dad, are they gonna be like that's probably the guy that got in?
There's glitter. It's a beautiful spot for jumping in. I'm very excited. I'm moderately nervous, but it's good for me, and I do this stuff to try to inspire you to go out there and get in the ditches and the creeks and all those places that everybody else just walks on top of, disregarding the wonderful living waters that are flowing beneath them that could cure them. The cures of life are in there. You watch this.
You might want to move that twig behind you.
I don't want to get a twig up my britches now, do I?
That wouldn't feel very good. Ah, there you go. Okay, it's still in your path.
Okay, well, oh my gosh, there's no way to get out of this now that I'm committed. My girls are coming by. Hey, live vibrantly every single day of your life. And when you get an opportunity to be cleansed, Father Yahweh, cleanse us of our sins. Forgive us our sins. Wash us and make us new. Fill us with your set-apart spirit, your Ruach HaKodesh, and make us mighty to be your remnant people. Once again, hallelujah. Thank you for your son. He gives us new life. This is where everything in you just makes you no.
You're in a mica pool.
Way colder.
That's what Mom does. Mom always puts her arms up. And I just lay as still as possible. Oh, he's drifting. Under the bridge.
He's gonna pop out the other side.
Let's catch him on the flip side. Oh!
I sent it in the water.
Oh no!
Stuck on the sand. It's too shallow.
I thought you were gonna float
I
right
tried
under.
to, but I got high centered.
Way to go.
Well, hallelujah. You know what the truth is? Now I feel better. It's so good. You know what? It is a good gift. And as much as I'm going to be moderately uncomfortable, I will have so much more joy than almost every other person I meet right now. I guarantee it. And I'm going to be filled with an excitement to tell the people about the kingdom of Yahuwah, to leave the rebellious kingdoms of the fallen ones, but to follow him mightily, cling to him, guard his commands, and love our neighbors as ourselves. Hallelujah.
We'll read good because we're going to read some serious amounts of scripture today. We're going to also read, I finished up the last few chapters of Shinar Directive, and I dove into the Genesis 6 conspiracy a little more. I'm probably not going to read from that too much today, but I'll tell you guys the long-term stuff that I'm studying. Once again, electrogravitics. I'm on the quest to dial in this sucker, the B2, stealth technology and fighter pilots, because I'm trying to understand the mechanics of how the immortals are transporting themselves around, how they're teleporting. You know what I mean? Because it's not just teleportation. I want to know the mechanics behind their technology. Like, it's a form of technology that they're dealing with. It's a sorcery to some. It's a technology to others. And it's downright divination to many. So, that being said, let's jump right in here. I had a question. Somebody sent me a question. If any of you guys have questions, topics you'd like me to answer, or things that you're like, as I'm talking along in here, things you're like, hey, you left this point hanging out in space, and I don't think you ever picked it up. Sometimes that happens. I apologize. I do my best to try to sew back in all of those little tapestries of loose threads that seem to be tangentially lost in time and space out there. Sometimes I lose them. So if you guys are always like, hey, what about this? Drop a comment below. Send me an email at snatchedfromtheflames@protonmail.com. I would love to hear from you. It's good. Sometimes I might take a week or a month. I'm sorry to get back to you. I'm just going to tell you right now. Don't idolize me. I'll let you down. Just a dude. Just a dude. I go to the bathroom like you guys do. Sometimes I poop in the woods. It's exhilarating. If you haven't done it, sprinkle some seeds on top of it. Be fruitful and multiply. Anyways, check out Guerrilla Gardening for a video all about pooping outside and sprinkling your seeds on it. It's terrifically exciting. Anyways, let's jump in here. Someone asked me a question. It launched me into a big, long study. I spent like 6 hours just exhilaratingly diving through the scriptures. The question was, hey, talking about the immortals and their influence on our lives, right? Because this is the war of the ages that we're all in. We're wrestling through it. We're fighting our way through it. And they have these like strategies and these tactics and these snares. Got to deal with the snares. But they asked me a question from like the scriptures, from the Old Testament, from the Torah. They're like, hey, can you give me like some scriptures to substantiate like specifically how when we go after these immortals that we fall subject to them, that like we receive the consequences of the curse, like why we fall prey to the curses or those consequences of them when we're serving them, when we become part of their dominion, you know? So that launched me into a whole bunch of them, because you obviously got to jump straight first and all. As always, we got to go right back to the heart of it. The heart of darkness, Genesis 3. We're going to start there. Check this out for a second. All right, dive in here. Oh, hold on. Bear with me. My children are getting to sleepy town right now. I can't be too loud. So if I'm a little muffled sometimes in these interviews, you guys, or any of my broadcasts or podcasts, whatever, it's because there's like a child almost always sleeping somewhere. They're just everywhere. They're coming out of my ears, literally. It's exciting. All right, hang in there. All you moms and dads, I love hearing from you, by the way. You sleepless nights people. People that are like, I'll listen to you at 3 a.m. when I'm feeding my child. That's awesome. You're a good mom. You're a good dad. Sleepless, exhausted, tirelessly frustrated. All those good things about being a parent. Like, I could get lost in the weeds there. But let's just stay focused here. All right. Check this out. Oh boy. Goes bad right away. And the Nachash. See, some of your translations in Genesis 3 start out with this thing, serpent or snake. It's the wrong image instantly. You're already like off base from the beginning. The Nachash is like a fiery serpent. Okay, later on in the scriptures, Yahuwah literally sends fiery serpents among the people to destroy them, to attack them, to bite them, to burn them up. It's a serious thing. They're not just like little snakes, right? These are like more like crocodiles, like crazy, terrifying, massive crocodiles. They had legs. They could stand, walk around, wings. They're like the ultimate. of the beasts of the field. It literally says they were like the king over all the animals, period, was these serpents, way more than like you think of the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. Slinger of venom, terrifying creature. First venomous snake I ever picked up with a stick on a field trip, 4th grade. I almost got in trouble. Thankfully, only 2 of my friends ratted me out. They didn't have a third witness. It was good. We went up to a fish hatchery in the White Mountains of Arizona, and I saw a western diamondback rattlesnake and was like, look at this, it's a rattlesnake. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I think it's fantastically fun. But that same year, I developed an incredible, terrifying fear of snakes because I grabbed onto a bull snake when I was swimming. I chased after it in this lake, Rainbow Lake, and I grabbed onto it by its tail and was like, look at this, I'm going to bring it back to shore. And that thing bit me non-stop. It just turned around and started biting me just over and over. And then I got panicked. I just like freaked out and locked up and held onto this snake with all my might. And it just kept biting me over and over and over and over and over and over. And I was like, oh. Some of you guys have been bit by the serpent that many times. Hang in there. It's going to get better. This is a much better. This is like with Dr. Michael Lake in the Sharith. What you talk about from the Sharith imperative, right? Empowering the remnant to overcome the gates of hell. That's more like what he has in mind. He talks about the serpent, the Nachash, right? Think more like that. Understand that Adam and Eve weren't doofuses. They're way smarter than you've ever been, ever will be. Understand something. They walked in absolute perfect unity with Yahuwah, like beyond our wildest understanding. We really can't comprehend the level of intelligence that they actually had. And so when we think of like a little tiny snake, because you've been brainwashed by all the worthless movies, all the absolutely worthless churchianity versions of this story where they're like showing you it's an apple. That's a total Gnostic doctrine, by the way. All that comes from the whole archons. And it's a straight up doctrine of demons that comes to convince you that it's an apple that they ate and the bitten apple and all. That's not what it says by any stretch of the imagination. This thing was a supranaturally intelligent, like immortal, that entered into the body of the serpent. This is real important. Like a fiery one, glorious, radiant, powerful, majestic, on fire, put himself in a tree and was on fire. That's who enters into the story right at the very beginning. So it's a way different image than what you get growing up. But it's really important that we understand who these immortals are, because if we think they're just a bunch of naked baby flying angels like the Catholic Church brainwashed us all to believe, we're going to be totally lost in the weeds and think these immortals that we're wrestling with are just some kind of thing, like some kind of art project, like it's just like a statue out in the garden. By no means whatsoever. Like, we're dealing with entities who had children with women that were the size of mountains. Gigantic, massive creatures, huge beings in the days of Jared, in the days of Methuselah. These things were enormous, and their children were living for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, this was a serious time where all of creation was just being completely genetically altered, and it was madness. And yet at the same time, technologically, exponentially more advanced than anything we've witnessed. Okay. The types of technology that like we have today are scratching at the doors of what the ancients had before the flood. That's why everyone's on their little quest to try to get and rediscover the ancient lost technologies, because ultimately what they're trying to uncover is the fruit of these immortals. They're trying to uncover the craft of these immortals because we don't have their same tools. Yahuwah was like, listen, these people are using it for all kinds of naughty stuff. So when you go back there, the seraphim, okay, let's go back in here. Enter the dragon. This is on page 59 of the Sharith Imperative. Now the serpent, Nachash, was more subtle than any beast of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said unto the woman, yes, as Elohim said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. I remember being taught the story of Genesis 3 as a young man in our local missionary Baptist church. Our pastor explained to our congregation that Satan entered into the serpent, a commonly held theology, and was able to speak and tempt Eve. Yet I always felt there was more to this narrative than what many of our theologians conveyed. In Hebrew, the word for serpent is nachash, which according to Strong's lexicon means snake, serpent, fleeing serpent, or the image of a serpent. In the Companion Bible, E.W. Bollinger reveals that the same term also means shining one. In the unseen realm, recovering the supernatural worldview of the Bible. Pause here for a second. This is a book recommendation. Check this out. When another excellent author makes a book recommendation, do understand it's a good idea. The Unseen Realm, Recovering the Supernatural Worldview of the Bible, Dr. Michael Heiser. Really important there. The title gives you a huge story there. The vast majority of all of us were actually raised without a supernatural worldview of the Bible because they raped that out of people's doctrine in their seminaries. Like they've been working very diligently. The Jesuits, predominantly, have been working very diligently to steal away people's actual understanding of the Bible. It's a supernatural book and not just like a ordinary man kind of thing. End quote. In some respects, we know that the Genesis serpent wasn't really a member of the animal kingdom. We have other passages to help us grasp that point, particularly in the New Testament. We understand that even though the New Testament writers refer to the serpent back in Eden, they are referring really to a supernatural entity, not a mere member of the animal kingdom. 2 Corinthians 11:3, 1 Thessalonians 3:5, and Revelation 12:9. Finally, in Forbidden Secrets of the Labyrinth, The Awakened Ones, The Hidden Destiny of America, and The Day After Tomorrow, biblical researcher Mark A. Flynn shares some of the historical etymology of this word. Later, quote, the term Nachash would come to equal a serpent after it took on the value of the curse that God gave it as a punishment for its act in the garden. What was this shining one that would later be equated with a serpent because of the curse of Elohim? This immortal was a seraph. Here's a working definition of seraph. Noun, 1667, first used by Milton, probably an analogy of cherub or cherubim. Back form singular from Old English, seraphim. From late Latin, seraphim. From Greek, seraphim. From Hebrew, seraphim. Only in Isaiah 11, the plural of seraph, which does not occur in the Bible, probably literally the burning one. From seraph, it burned. Seraphs were traditionally regarded as burning or flaming angels, though the word seems to have the etymology sense of flying, perhaps from the confusion with the Arabic sharafa, be lofty. Some scholars identify it with the word that's found in later passages interpreted as fiery flying serpents. So does that help to give a little context of the immortal start point? Okay. That sets the stage a little better for understanding from Genesis through the rest of the scriptures the types of immortals that we're actually battling with. Brilliant ones, okay? Brilliant, literally shining ones. So that's why later on when it says the devil, marvel not that the devil masquerades as an angel of light, as an immortal of light, and his messengers, his servants, do likewise. That's what he's talking about. That's what would have come to the minds of a Hebrew, somebody who had read the scriptures from beginning to end from a Hebraic perspective. They would be thinking that type of thing. They would not be thinking a snake like a Western diamondback rattlesnake. That's not what they would be thinking about. They would be thinking about that kind of stuff because the iconography, the gods, the temples, the practices of the brotherhood of the snake, of these serpent eaters, this stuff was everywhere. It always has been. It always will be until the very end when Yeshua comes and crushes finally the head of the serpent. And then he is bound and cast into the lake of fire. Hallelujah. What a glorious day that will be. It's what it was created for. It was created for the immortals and for the dragon. That's literally what these things were made for. That's where they're supposed to be. And that's why the goal of the immortals is to take people captive and bring them in to their kingdom. They want passengers. They do. But on one side of it, they're using them as batteries until that hour. But that's not the place we want to be in. I don't want any of you to be there. And that's why we're wrestling with people, trying to get them to be drawn into an understanding of the mightiness of the scripture. All right, so let's dive in. Keep going here in the story. And then Nahash was more crafty than all the lives of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the Nahash, we are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the Nahash said to the woman, you shall not certainly die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Those are the three snares, y'all. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes and desirable to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Thus the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together, and they made loin coverings for themselves. Pause right there. Understand, when you see people with these secret societies wearing aprons, right? Like, I did an interview, I'll release it here shortly, with this guy, Truth Talk with Steve, who came out of the Mormon church, Freemasonic through and through. Okay. And he shared in our interview, I asked him a lot of questions about the specifics of the rituals that go on in the temple and them wearing their apron, getting washed, getting naked in front of people, other men, going into this chamber for their ritual washing. And then they come out, put on their apron. The apron for the Freemasonics, like the brotherhoods, this is indicative of them owing allegiance back to this moment in the garden of sewing fig leaves together and making coverings for themselves. That's where that comes from. Understand something. That's the origins of it. So when you're seeing like the Gmail apron, you know what I'm talking about? All the little iconography and sorcery that everyone's doing with their stupid symbols, that kind of stuff. This is where it's rooted in. Okay. That's their covering. Does that make sense? Please understand. Like that's man's attempt to cover up his shame. Doesn't go well. So please remember this. When you see this kind of stuff, there's reasons that people are wearing their aprons. Like there's a reason President Truman, Harry S. Truman, 32nd, actually 33rd president, 33rd degree Freemason, first of all, Grandmaster, a Shriner, diehard through and through. Let me just show you. I may have mentioned him before. Oh, it's just a cesspool of disgusting, worthless leaders. So sad. How lame. You know what I'm saying? Like if you really sit down and you wrote out like first and second king style, all of the presidents that our country has had as our leaders, it's super sad. It's really bad. Almost all of the ones that you were raised to believe were the good guys are literally the bad guys. They're literally the worst people. You're brainwashed to think about Benjamin Franklin as like the iconic hero, Thomas Jefferson, like the inventor of all inventors. These amazing people. They dug under Benjamin Franklin's house, like literally today. They're like, we need to do some excavation work on his house. And they start digging down into the foundations. They're like, we keep finding burnt bodies, ritually burnt bodies. Not just one, like more than a dozen. Oh, yeah, that Hellstone, Brimstone Club that he's a part of. Like these people, he's a part of the fiery club, literally. Like these secret societies are incessant. Thomas Jefferson, you know, the designer, the architect of a lot of the rotunda, the great womb of Isis that's sitting over our Capitol building, where George Washington goes through his apotheosis as God, enthroned as Zeus, surrounded by 72 pentagrams and all the mighty ones, all the immortals that are sitting there around him. Like this is our Capitol building, you guys, where our leaders and governors, they go and sit under the influence of that spiritual pantheon. It's literally, he took a mere copy of the pantheon from overseas. Stupid Romans. Thinking disgusting Romans. Little city on the Potomac. It's literally why Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia is Little Rome. Please understand something. The Holy Roman Empire never stopped. They never lost. They didn't. They just changed form like a shapeshifter. Stinking chameleons, man. All the time. All the time. Let me just show you Harry S. Truman and his ridiculous garb. Okay, this is literally what these people are all about, y'all. Right here. These are our leaders. Like this is their legacy. Bam. There you go, son. There's your president. You'd be like, thanks for dropping that nuclear weapon, allegedly, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I could go down that rabbit hole a long time, you guys. Hang in there. Anyways, this is the whole apron with the lazy eye of Lucifer just chilling. Okay, this is what this is all about. And there's a little, oh, there's another one. You ready? Think that's great. Look at this disgusting stuff. It's not gross. Hang in there, guys. It's not like, this is all PG stuff. I'm not going to do anything that's not biblical, conversationally wise. I'm trying to do this series so that like you young men, young women can also participate and chat along here. But it's the reality. There you go. There's Harry S. Truman, the Grand Master, the past Grand Master, noble 33rd President of the United States, Harry S. Truman Centennial. That's the Shriner's little fedora cap there, 1884 to 1972. This is our leaders. That sucks. He's like King Ahab. Dang it. That's brutal. So you got to understand something. Don't dive into the politicking game, you guys. I'm trying to warn you. It's a war of the immortals. That's it. That's really where the fight is. Stay in the fight. Stay here. This is where the battlegrounds are really fought. Like we got to pray that Yahweh brings down that 666-foot obelisk, 555 feet sticking above the ground, 111 feet sticking below the ground. That's what Washington Monument that's sitting there in front of the reflecting pool. All this is as above, so below, like the reflecting pool. I could go all day on this stupid, disgusting, ridiculous garbage that they're just shoving in front of your face. They're like, hey, let's do a field trip for you guys. It's high school. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take your children captive and make them go to the Masonic ritual house of the Washington Capitol. You're like, oh, It's patriotic, right? It's super patriotic. Let's go stand in front of the idol of Abraham Lincoln. Yay! I digress. And they heard the voice of Yahweh Elohim walking about in the garden toward the wind of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. And Yahweh Elohim called unto Adam and said to him, Where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. And he said, Who made you know that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat? And the man said, The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, What is this you have done? And the woman said, The Nachash deceived me. That's that vanity. Literally, he led her into vanity. And I ate. And Yahweh Elohim said to the Nachash, Because you've done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you are to go and eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. Bring forth children in pain, and your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. And to the man he said, Because you've listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you, saying, Do not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you are taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. Brutal. That's the starting point, right? Who they obeyed is who they became slaves of, right? That's it. They became slaves of that which the ones that they obeyed. And this is the fundamental crux of the entire story. From here to the very end, who we obey is literally the ones that we believe are our master. It's who we believe in. That's how we know the evidence of the fruits of our belief are our obedience. That's it. Fundamentally, that's the mark. The great mark of the beast is ultimately obedience to another kingdom's system, right? They are designing a system of the beast that if you do not consent and comply to it, they are going to use all cunning forms of deceptions and beguilement to augment you, to transform you out of the image of man and into the image of a beast. That's the fundamental goal. The heart of truly the mark of the beast, you guys, is absolutely transformation, turning you into a shapeshifter. Okay. That's their very nature of these immortals. They are trying to turn you into their image bearers, and they're trying to turn you away from the image bearers of the Messiah, and to such an extent that you will literally be uninhabitable by the set apart spirit. Okay. This is why at the very end, Yahweh sends his righteous immortals to sift through the tares, those who have, like the sons of the serpent, completely augmented into a different image bearer. Then he's separating those from the righteous, the pure bloods, like Noah and his generation. They were pure. That's it. That's all the bloodline that was left that was pure. Every single other person on the earth was genetically altered. They had completely been taken snare by the immortals and were augmented. They were not redeemable. Same thing is going to take place towards the very end. This is why Yeshua's very critical words to us about indicators, signs to look for that the end of days were coming was that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. That ping is our stuff to keep our eyes out for. So when we see that absolute transformation campaign taking place of genetic alteration, this is the hallmark of the immortals. This is the hallmark of the fallen watchers, these shining ones. This is what they do. This is part of their nature, is to augment things, turn them into different things, corrupt it, corrupting the image fundamentally. Now, we're going to jump into a little bit of the story here in Exodus, because this begins to play out when there's obedience to these other mighty ones versus obedience to Yahweh. Okay. And fundamentally, this is where we've got to build out our understanding of how it all goes down. Exodus 23. All right. We're going to jump in here. Verse 21, Exodus 23:21. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. I'll go back a little bit. Let's go back. Verse 20. See, I am sending a messenger before you to guard you in the way. This is a righteous immortal. Please understand something here, real quick. In this translation, we're going to see messenger as the way they translate angels instead of angels. Angels is not an accurate translation. Neither is messenger exclusively. Some of these angels, some of these immortals' jobs is to be a messenger, but other times that's not it. Sometimes they are a destroyer. That's it. It's like, what's up, son? I'm here to only destroy continually. I want to be so around that one. Don't you want to just hang out with that immortal? Be like, yo, what's up, destroyer? You're terrifying. Terrifying. Ask the Egyptians and the firstborn of Egypt how that went down. You can't because they're dead, son. You betcha. That's one of the destroyers. It's like the people that showed up at Sodom and Gomorrah. They're like, what's up? We're going to bring fire on this place. That's it. That's their job. Like the angel of Yahuwah. My contention is the theophany. It's the appearance of Yeshua on the earth sneakily before his time. Kills 185,000 Assyrians in a night. He's cutting down like 8 a second. It's amazing. One of my favorite stories in the entire scriptures. These immortals don't mess around. They don't play around. Don't mess around with them either. You know what I'm saying? That's why we're not to revile them, because these are the righteous ones. Vast majority of them have not rebelled. Never lose sight of this story. As bad as the bad guys are, there's way more righteous warring immortals for the kingdom of Yahuwah, all the way to the end. At the very end, the dragon is able to deceive a third of the immortals to follow with him. He gets a third of them. Right. But that's still seriously outnumbered. You know what I'm saying? So we'll jump into verse 20. This is a really important thing because this messenger of Yahuwah, literally he's identified later on in the scriptures. It's like the rock that followed them was Yeshua. They're telling him to obey his voice. See, I am sending a messenger before you to guard you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he is not going to pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. But if you diligently obey his voice and shall do all that I speak, then I shall be an enemy to your enemies and a distresser to those who distress you. For my messenger shall go before you and shall bring you into the Amorites and the Hittites and the Pizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I shall cut them off. Do not bow down to their mighty ones, their immortals, nor serve them, nor do according to their works. But without fail, overthrow them, and without fail, break down their pillars. That's their obelisks. Please never lose sight of it. That's like the George Washington monuments. That's like every one of those stupid, disgusting, nasty things sitting in the graveyards. You guys are like, that's their pillars. This is why you can still see we're still in the land of Egypt today. And you shall serve Yahweh your Elohim, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I shall remove sickness from your midst. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I shall fill the number of your days. I shall send my fear before you, and shall cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I shall send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, and before you. I shall not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become a waste, and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. Little by little I shall drive them out from before you, until you've increased and you inherit the land. And I shall set your border from the sea of reeds to the sea of the Philistines, from the wilderness to the river. For I shall give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them, nor with their mighty ones. Let them not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me when you serve their mighty one, when it becomes a snare to you. That's the heart of the matter. When you serve their immortals, when you serve the immortals, when you bow down to their kingdom, when you follow after their ways, when you engage in following the traditions of man that are rooted in paganism, we fall snare to their wiles, their schemes, their methodologies. And when we do that, it's a curse upon us. This is where the root cause of so many issues and afflictions that people have in their life can stem from, is that we get caught in these snares. Okay, that word snare, by the way, makash, let's see it right here. You ready for this? Makesh, excuse me. This is Strong's H4170 and H3369. In Hebrew, it's as in a noose for catching or the snare of an animal, or spiritually, as in the snare of a jinn, demons, right? Spiritual immortals. Likewise, in Ernest Klein's dictionary, also renders this as minds on page 381. For those of you that have the red dictionary, go get them. 381 mentions this as to mine, to lay mines, snares. So the way following these immortals literally is like running into their minefield. That's it. They go out into the world and they fill it with mines. And then they just wait for us to run into their field. And they're like, I'm going to get you. This is why the letter of the law, the Torah, is life and death. Because if you follow these words, it will protect you from going over the fence. It's like a giant barbed wire. If none of you have ever been on a military base, let me just give you an example. When you go on certain military bases, they have they have a firing line. Okay, when you go out to a range, they have a firing line, a place where you stand and you direct your fire that way. You don't direct it this way, you don't direct it that way, right? Or the drill sergeant smacks you in the head and freaking knocks you out. It's hilarious. It can kill people. If you walk out into that firing range, you can run into what's called unexploded ordinances. Like there's times when you shoot, like if you're shooting an M16A1, it has a semi-auto, full auto version of it. It also has a M203 grenade launcher attached to the bottom side of it, which is a 40 millimeter grenade launcher. This uses a 40 millimeter grenade is launched slow velocity. This is not a high velocity. There's something that's way more exciting. Oh my gosh. The Mark 19 fully automatic grenade launcher. You cannot take the 40 millimeter grenades that fit perfectly in the Mark 19 and your 203. If you put those grenades from the Mark 19 into your M203 and you shoot that thing, which is on the underside of your little barrel of your rifle, if you put those grenades in there and you pull the trigger, you're going to blow up and die. You betcha. Because they use C4, which is a high velocity explosive in the Mark 19 to launch those things hundreds of yards. Yeah, crazy stuff. Anyways, those were my favorite. That and the M2 machine gun were my favorite things I ever shot in my entire life. Super exhilarating. Anyways, when you shoot some of those rounds off, right, you can have some of them like the M203. The grenade shoots out of a rifling. Okay. So it spins. And the thing inside it, the actual fuse, the detonator inside it is activated after a certain number of rotations. And if it does not achieve that correct number of rotations for whatever reason, or if there is a problem inside of it, a lot of times in basic training, you're using up old munitions by design. They're like, just give it to the stupid dogs. So that's what you are. You're like dogs in the military. Give it to the dogs. You shoot it out. Well, sometimes you shoot it and it doesn't explode. And so that stuff sits out there on the range, right? And that's the area that's like big signs all over the place. You'll be walking around in areas that they may have had a firing line there where you're walking, and the old range used to be that way. And so you're walking along and there'll be barbed wire, sometimes not. Sometimes there's just a sign that says skull and crossbones style, death that way, warning, don't go that way. Unexploded ordinances. Don't pick up anything you find. You're like, oh, look at this piece of. Then you lose your hand and your face, and everybody watches you bleed to death and die. That's the minefield of the enemy. That's what the immortals have built out there for us. That's it. That's what's outside of your house. You're like, oh, you're right. This is why it's so imperative we raise our children up in the ways of Yahuwah. Like Deuteronomy, that's another one. We'll get there in a second. But I'm going to jump ahead anyways, because this is literally the description about this. Deuteronomy 7. So good. And 11. Mm-hmm. That's what the scriptures are. That's what the Torah is. The Torah is the warning. It's like there's life this way, there's death this way. So if you go over that fence, you're going to die. You stay inside this fence, it's called a het, the letter in Hebrew. It's literally like a big white linen fence. Like before you would enter the tabernacle, there's a gigantic big white linen fence that was on the outside of the whole thing. And there was one way in and one way out. That's why Yeshua was like, I am the door. A Hebrew would have been like, oh, I know what you're talking about. One way in, the way, the truth, and the life. All those things were like explanations for the tabernacle. There's one way in, the door, the outer court, inner court, most set apart place. Those were the way, the truth, and the life. Walking in those. There's one way into all that. Yeshua is like, I'm the one way into the tabernacle to be with your Father. That's it. That's an important statement. There was a guard who stood there and who would kill you if you were not allowed to be in that place. That's his job. That's a guardian, right? Samurai. We get the word samurai. It's literally what shamar. Shema means hear and obey. Shamar is like a guardian, a fierce, ferocious, terrifying dude standing there who's like, I will kill you instantly, son. That guy. That's what we're supposed to be, zealous like those guys. I like those guys. If you're one of those guys, I love you. Keep your edges sharp. Super sharp. Check this out. Deuteronomy 6:4. They're commandments. People were like, you got to write these things. And this is the command, the laws, and the right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim, to guard all his laws and his commands, which I command you, you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Yisrael, and shall guard to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you increase greatly, as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Yahweh, oh, this is so good. Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. That's the intentional building up of our children so that they're ready to navigate the minefield when they walk out the door. Like the biggest, like the most dangerous thing my family encounters on a regular basis when we step out the door are dogs. We go on a lot of walks. I got little children and we have dog problems everywhere we go. We went on a walk. Neighborhoods. We were living more city life. You know what I'm saying? And I know there's a lot of you that do that life, you know? The Reynolds were back in city life because the whole RV thing went to pieces. Anyways, we'd go on walks with my children and my twin babies. Vulnerable. No one took a staff. The dogs came. Stinking dogs. They're wolves. Anyways, dogs came. No one had a staff. Sketchy, scary. Children are freaked out. Next time, Dad goes with the spear. Super sharp, deadly sharp. I've learned a lesson about my spears. You know, I have this video called The Blunt End of the Spear about stabbing people in the stomach with the blunt end of the spear. I made one. Recently it broke because my child smashed it down on the ground. Dang it. I used old agates. I used agates for the spearhead. They break easily. I don't recommend them. They're cool. They look really cool. They're savage looking. They're super ancient, but they break. Dadgummit. It broke. Anyways, I have a super sharp metal one. That's razor sharp. This big black dog came charging at my children, chased the children, the little tiny children. He went after them because they're easy meat. And so I ran charging at his face with my spear, and that dog ran the other way. You betcha. And then he bull charged me again, and I yelled at him, come on, what's up with this? I like to snarl at them. I can be mighty when I need to be. Anyways, that is teaching my children how to handle the world. You know what I'm saying? Direct conflict at times, you betcha. Because I understand we've gone outside enough and we've learned a lesson. A staff is somewhat helpful. There's a time when I really want to stab a dog through its heart. If you haven't read my book, there's like a major terrifying chapter. One of the worst, almost horrible moments of Naomi and I's life was when I was wearing her as a baby and we got attacked by these 3 pit bulls, huge, stinking, steroid raging out pit bulls on the side of a lake while I was wearing her, and I couldn't get to my pistol. Yes, I used to always carry a pistol continually 24/7. I used to sleep with it. It was like my wife. Anyways, I used to carry this pistol, but I was wearing this baby strapped on my belly and I couldn't get it because I carry appendix style. You know what I'm saying? So I can get quick reaction time, shots on target efficiently. I couldn't get to that. And then I used to always carry a reverse edge knife. I'm going to just give you guys some insight. A reverse edge knife is carrying it like this grip, okay? You can have like this grip. This is like a traditional, hammer grip like this. Then you have this kind of grip. Then you have ice pick grip, which is like this, This sock. These are different things, and it's a lot. Then there's reverse grip. Well, this was something that was a Spyderco made this knife that I really loved at the time. It had a hawkbill blade, so it's curved like this. And so it was made so that you could use the big lat muscles in your back. When you make a pull cut, you would just rip right through rib cages all the way down. So you can make a strike right through at this point, this beautiful first rib point, and then you just go all the way down. Anyways, that's the knife I used to carry all the time. I never had to use it in violence. But I couldn't get to that knife because I was wearing this baby strapped to my chest. And I couldn't get to my knife and I couldn't get to my pistol. And so I was beating this dog with a stupid plastic leash for my dog. It didn't go super well. And then some gigantic man showed up and threw the dog over his shoulder and body slammed it. It was amazing. You should read the book. It's crazy stuff. Dogs have been almost every time the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to my family. Apart from times people try to murder us and kill us, the dogs, man. So anyways, I teach my children every time we go out of the house, we walk with sticks, walk with staffs. Well, you get to a place where you realize you're like, you know what? It'd be a lot better to be able to stab this dog. Like those pit bulls, I'm not confident I could have killed those pit bulls as easily with a staff. Now I have a super strong, like hedge apple, amazing staff that's like made of iron. I'm a lot more confident with that thing now. But you got to be ready. That's why I recommend oak or hickory staffs, so you can really break something over the skull with it. A spear, on the other hand, is really effective for doing that. So my children have literally grown up for 7 years watching our family do this. We walk out the door and it's like, bring a staff, because they've had this stuff happen over and over again. Well, there's other worse things out there in the world I'm going to have to train my children up to understand and how to engage, like how to dismantle the enemy when they come in at you, because it's inevitable. This stuff is coming at us, you guys, and we better raise our children up to know how to navigate these waters. This is our responsibility. For those of you that don't have children, just tuck this away. Please understand, you might have other young children who look up to you and be like, I want to be like you. They might aspire to be like you. You have an opportunity to influence them with an understanding for how the world really operates and try to keep them from these snares, these mines that the enemy is laying up to blow their life apart. How many of you guys have had your life blown apart when you stepped into enemy territory and you were not ready for it? A lot of you. And we're literally dealing with the baggage. That's why we're like, unfortunately, the body of Messiah looks a lot like the Veterans Club. You know what I'm saying? A lot of blown up people out there. There's a lot of IEDs that took us out way too many times. Blown up, got no arms and legs. We're missing. We're all haggard. Our faces are blown to pieces. We can't talk right. We can't walk right. We can't eat right. We can't poop right. We can't. This is how we look. The remnant's ragged, you guys. The remnant's ragged. That's why we got to do our utmost to try to raise up another generation to avoid that minefield that we went through and teach them the straight and narrow path, to stay on the narrow path of life, truth, holiness, set apartness. It's called sanctification, that they would live their life with the fear of Yahweh, like an actual fear of him, to keep them from going off to these other things, because it's death over there. You know, man. This is his warning right after the whole people write this on their doorposts. I encourage you to do this. This is a simple command that Yahuwah gave us. Write these words on your house, like at the gates. If you got gates, the entrance of your property, whatever level of it is, take a pencil and write it on there. Take a permanent marker, write it on the doorpost, the frame of your door. If you live in an apartment, I've written this on places all over where we went. You can write the 10 Commandments on it. You could write your favorite scripture verses on it. Like, write the words of command on your heart. Like, there's a beautiful thing that happens when you pick up your hand and you write these things over the threshold of your life. That way, when these things come against you, when the immortals send forth their messengers to do their bidding, to come at you, you have some authority to stand upon that stuff is not allowed in your house, that you do not allow a territory in this house, that you don't allow those cursed things to come in your house, but you drive them out. And if they come in, man, you consistently work to continue to drive them out. Verse 10. And it shall be when Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov, to give you great and good cities which you did not build, and houses filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, and wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and shall eat and be satisfied. Be on guard, lest you forget Yahuwah, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, from the house of bondage. Fear Yahweh your Elohim, and serve him, and swear by his name. Do not go after other mighty ones, the mighty ones of the people who are all around you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a jealous El in your midst, lest the displeasure of Yahweh your Elohim burn against you. Then he shall destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not try Yahweh your Elohim as you tried him in Massah. Diligently guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim and his witnesses and his laws which he commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of Yahuwah, so that it might be well with you, and you shall go in and possess the land of which Yahuwah swore to your fathers, to drive out all your enemies from before you, as Yahuwah has spoken. When your son asks you in time coming, What is the meaning of the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh our Elohim has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand. And Yahweh sent signs and wonders great and grievous upon Mitzrayim, upon Pharaoh and upon all his household before our eyes. And he brought us out from there to bring us in, to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers. And Yahweh commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahweh our Elohim for our good always, to keep us alive as it is today. And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahweh our Elohim as he has commanded us. This is where that beautiful word righteousness has so much of its foundations. Every time you're going to read about righteousness later on in the scriptures, understand this is where it's built from. This is the foundations from where those things come from. This is the guide. It's like the Holy Spirit, the set apart Spirit is our guide to help us navigate the world of death that is out there, the minefields that are waiting to just blow us apart. He's inviting us into a walk with him to keep us from turning to the right or to the left, but that we would stay on the narrow path and to diligently guard these words, to cling to him, right? So that we do not turn aside. That word, when we turn astray, when we go astray, it's like that's satanic. That's literally satanic. That's the immortals thing. That's what they did. They went aside. They turned astray from keeping the commands. That's obedience to the rebels. And any of you who have had rebellious children understand what this was like. Any of you who've known people in your life, your friends who turned down that path, you've watched them, and you can go back in your mind to remember the moment when they compromised, when they had been raised in the right way and they left it. When they left it, and you watch their life. I was just talking to a guy the other day, and he shared with me a story of this woman that he knew and her daughter, who was just brilliant, beautiful, lovely girl. The woman had her master's degree, working and successful and thriving, and then got snared through drugs, got snared, hooked on drugs until she killed her, blew her life apart and killed her like that, destroyed her. Like the level of destruction that's coming in through the types of street drugs, like the introduction of fentanyl into so many of the street drugs of all kinds and varieties, is killing people so fast. It's destroying communities. It's destroying people's lives. There's people that I talk to who had their lives exploded because of it. Their bodies still wear the scars. And you know what? By a miracle of deliverance, they are working their way to restore what was stolen from them, what was destroyed from them. And you know what? There's a lot of people who they don't get a second chance at it. There's a lot of people who just barely tap into it and it blows them apart. So be on guard. This gets us to Deuteronomy 7 here. When Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land which you go to possess, he shall also clear away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. When Yahweh your Elohim gives them over to you, you shall strike them and put them under the ban completely. Make no covenant with them and show them no favor. Do not intermarry with them, and you do not give your daughter to his son, and you do not take his daughter for your son, for he turns your sons away from following me to serve other mighty ones. Then the displeasure of Yahweh shall burn against you and promptly destroy you. But this is what you do to them. Break down their slaughter places, smash their pillars, cut down their asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a set apart people to Yahweh your Elohim. Yahweh your Elohim has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples on the face of the earth. Yahweh did not set his love on you, nor choose you because you were more numerous than any of the people, for you were the least of all the peoples. But because of Yahweh loving you, and because of him guarding the oath which he swore to your fathers, Yahweh has brought you out with a strong hand and ransomed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim. And you shall know that Yahweh your Elohim, he is Elohim, the trustworthy El, guarding covenant and loving commitment for 1,000 generations with those who love him and those who guard his commands, but repaying those who hate him to their face, to destroy them. He does not delay to do so with him who hates him. He repays him to his face. And you shall guard the command and the laws and the right rulings, which I command you today to do them. And it shall be because you hear these right rulings and shall guard to do them, that Yahweh your Elohim shall guard you with covenant and the loving commitment which he swore to your fathers, and shall love you and bless you and increase you, and shall bless the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your land, your grain, your new wine, and your oil, the increase of your cattle and the offspring of your flock in the land of which he swore to your fathers to give you. Blessed are you above all peoples. There's not going to be a barren man or a barren woman among you or among your livestock. And Yahweh shall turn away from you all sickness and put on you none of the evil diseases of Mitzrayim, which you have known, but he shall put them on all those who hate you. And you shall consume all the peoples whom Yahweh your Elohim is delivering over to you. Your eye shall not pardon them. Do not serve their mighty ones, for that is a snare to you. That's a minefield to you. Serving their mighty ones, serving their idols, their immortals, is the snare to you. It is the noose on your neck. It is the balm in your face. When you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, and I'm unable to drive them out, do not be afraid of them. Remember well that Yahweh your Elohim did to Pharaoh and to all of Mitzrayim the great trials which your eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders, the strong hand, the outstretched arm by which Yahweh your Elohim brought you out. Yahweh your Elohim does so to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. And Yahweh your Elohim also sends the hornet among those until those who are left, who hid themselves from you, are destroyed. Do not be afraid of them, for Yahweh your Elohim, the great and awesome El, is in your midst. And Yahweh your Elohim shall drive out those nations before you little by little. You are not allowed to destroy them all at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous of you. But Yahweh your Elohim shall deliver them over to you and destroy them with a great destruction until they are consumed. And he shall give their sovereigns into your hands, and you shall destroy their name from under the heavens. No one is going to stand against you until you've destroyed them. The carved images of their mighty ones you are to burn with fire. Do not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snared by it. For it is an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. And do not bring an abomination into your house, lest you be accursed like it. Utterly loathe it, and utterly hate it, for it is accursed. This is where it comes from. This is where these cursed objects come from. When we bring them into our house, when we open up our lives to these things and we comply and we consent with their practices, it becomes the snare to us. It is like bringing a mine into your house. The most dangerous mine I ever held was the Claymore mine. Okay. 100 basically is a green plastic rectangle, slightly curved face to it. It has high speed explosive on it. I believe it's C4. And then it has hundreds of ball bearings, tiny little hardened steel balls on the face of that. It's like Play-Doh. Looks like Play-Doh, really. This thing is encased in this weatherproof plastic, okay? And you get these two little detonators that you slide into there and screw in, okay? And then you have a wire. You can use a couple of different forms of activation on it, but you have this wire that you bring out, okay? You set this thing up so that when somebody trips or comes across it and pulls on that wire, right, it fires, because that's how like C4 is detonated. It's because this little firing that goes off inside it. That detonates this thing, and those ball bearings go shooting off like the worst swarm of bees in the history of the world in all these directions. And it's got this pattern of spread like this. So you can be behind it and be relatively safe. But everything out there, boom, is going to be blown apart. Way more deadly than a grenade. Terrifyingly so. They don't give them to soldiers just willy-nilly. Neither do they give grenades to soldiers willy-nilly. They really don't. It's kind of hilarious. There's these ideas that you have about how soldiers actually get to live their life and how much they don't do that. Like, soldiers are not allowed to be armed on their own basis to protect themselves or their families. How insane it is. How insane it is. We don't allow our soldiers to keep their weapons. Understand that. That's how ridiculous it is. not on their persons or with them. Like it's locked up in the armory. Understand? Because a lot of our soldiers lack morality and they're drunk and they're out of their minds and it's a mess. You take morality out of the kingdom of your soldiers, this is what we get, the fruit of it. But it's ridiculous. Like just ridiculous. The video that got me like shot up on YouTube here. I interviewed a guy named Guido in Switzerland. He's from Switzerland. And he talked about how soldiers, when they get out of the army, they can keep their rifles. That's amazing. It's amazing. They can buy them. They can keep them. I wish that was like that here. But they don't want their soldiers keeping the rifles. No, sir. They're like, no, we don't want any of you guys having any of these guns. They're like, give it back. You give it all back. But we got to navigate these minefields. We got to keep guarding the covenant. We got to guard the covenant. When we guard the covenant, Yahweh upholds his end of the deal. He's like, there's an agreement here. He's promised to keep his end of the bargain. Deuteronomy 11. Let's just reiterate. Let's punch it straight more in the throat a few more times here, shall we? It's good for us. These are like the imperative stories that we should know well, because this is the fundamental basis of all spiritual warfare. It comes down to this. This is like the reality of where spiritual warfare is built. There's lots of great teachings on spiritual warfare. Many of them neglect the roots that are found in the Old Testament, in the scriptures here. But this is where it all comes from. Chapter 11. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim and guard his charge, even his laws and his right rulings and his command always. And you shall know today, for it is not your children who have not known and who have not seen the discipline of Yahweh your Elohim, his greatness, his strong hand and his outstretched arm, and his signs and his works which he had done in the midst of Mitzrayim, to Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and to all his land, and that which he had done to the army of Mitzrayim, to their horses and their chariots, when he made the waters of the sea of reeds overflow them as they pursued you, and how Yahweh was destroyed them to this day. Oh, I just got to pause for a second. Exodus 12:12. He judged the mighty ones. He judged the immortals. This is how all of that took place. In order for Moses to be successful, in order for the Israelites to be able to escape out of Egypt, he had to judge the immortals behind the scene. Every sign and wonder that he did against Egypt, against Mitzrayim, was literally knocking one of the deities, the immortals, off their pantheistic pomp. Okay? He knocked them off of it. That's why it was such a big deal, because the nations of the world heard about it, because these immortals do have power and they had signs that followed them. So when suddenly someone who's like, hey, we serve Ra, the sun god, and suddenly Yahweh turns off the sun, boop, for 3 days, that's a big deal. That's a noticeable sign. Understand something that had never happened before, not one time. So like if an immortal is masquerading, trying to convince people that he is in charge of the sun, and suddenly Yahweh comes in and is like, no, you're not. I'll tell the sun to be off. Think about that for a second. That should throw some kink works into your views of celestial things. Something to consider. Exodus 12:12. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall strike all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones, all the immortals of Mitzrayim, I shall execute judgment. I am Yahuwah. Again, he reiterates this in Exodus 34. Let's go there. This is so good. Exodus 32 is a devastatingly frustrating chapter. This is when the people of the land at Sinai are like, hey, Moses is gone. Where'd that dude go? I don't know. He left us. He's been up on that mountain in that fiery cloud for a while now. Hey, Aaron. Hey, Aaron. You know what we should do? Let's make idols. Let's make some images. Let's make some molten calves. I got some gold here. I got golden earrings here. Let's throw those in the fire. Let's make us some golden bowls, shall we? You betcha. Hey, what do you think they did in Israel? The sins of Jeroboam. Dadgummit, he made golden calves. This golden bowls. What the heck? He's like, I'm sorry. It's so many facepalm moments. They're at the mountain. They go through all these wonderful signs, miracles, deliverances. They're like, yay, Moses is gone. These people were pagans. Like, you got to remember, they're like all of us that were raised in the house of paganism. We're like, dang it. We don't even know. They literally say to Aaron, they're like, hey, This is a good, like these apis bulls that were worshipped in Egypt. I think the god of foot or fat, foot. I don't want to get it wrong here. The name of this. The immortals were linked to Ta, Ptah, as well as the apis bull and the Canaanite El. That's the deities here they're bowing down to and fornicating to. Because it's not just like they then take off their clothes, they get naked, and they engage in all kinds of filthy stuff, ritual practice for, fertility practices. That's what they do there. This is their marriage ceremony with Yahuwah. This is literally supposed to be their like wedding ceremony. And instead, they're yoking themselves to another immortal. They're like, yeah, somebody bring out the tabernacle of Moloch. Where's that star of Remphan? Read. Oh, it's just so frustrating. So this is what happens, Exodus 32. It's bad. Aaron like makes this for them as the priest of the whole people. He like links them up to the spirit of whoredom. Yahweh is super pissed. He's like, fire, I'm going to kill them all. Moses, I'm going to start with you. And Moses is like, dang right, you are not going to do that. No, so Moses is like literally interceding on the behalf of the people. He's like, come on. You don't want to, everyone knows you did all this stuff. Then they're going to know you brought them out here. What, to just kill them? He's like, please be merciful to them. And Yahweh is like, relents. He's like, fine. Then Moses walks down there, sees what's going on. He's super ticked, so he throws down the sapphire tablets. No! Breaks them. Oh, which means at the foot of Sinai, the real Sinai, whichever one it really is, there should be sapphire pieces there. That's how you would know. Written by the very finger of Elohim. Yeshua said he came and cast out demons by the finger of Elohim. Oh, that's so spicy. Those sapphire tablets, pieces of those sapphires would still be there. We should be able to find them. Oh, that would be so cool. Anyways, Moses takes all of the people and he's like, what happened? What the heck? They tell him. He's like, okay, go kill all those people that fornicated, yoked themselves to these other immortals. Kill them. We're going to start again. Purge the people. Moses goes back up on the mountain, and that's kind of where we pick up again. So now he's back up on the mountain. New sapphire tablets. Got to write on those. This is Exodus 34. Super lame. And, oh, by the way, Moses made them drink their idol. He crushed up their idols, poured it into the spring, the brook that was flowing down out of the mountain, and made them drink it. Oh, it's like the bitter water that makes the curse. This is some crazy, heavy, awesome stuff in here. And Yahweh said to Moshe, cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, sapphire tablets. If you're not familiar with that, Exodus 24:10, Yahweh says, and they saw the Elohim of Yisrael, and under his feet was a pave work of sapphire stones. Like 2 verses later, he says, take stones from that, bring them up to the mountain. So when Yahweh showed up, it's literally like ground turned to sapphire. Beautiful. And then Moses cut stones out of that. That's the 10 commandments were not written on blocks of granite. They were written on sapphires. This is super important, critically important thing. Sapphire tablets. So every time you read about the commandments of stone, sapphire. It's beautiful. Anyways. And be ready in the morning. Then you shall come up in the morning to Mount Sinai to present yourself to me on the top of the mountain. And let no man come up with you, and let no man be seen in all the mountains, and let not even the flock or the herd be fed in the front of the mountain. And he cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. Then Moses rose early in the morning and went up Mount Sinai as Yahweh commanded him. And he took 2 tablets of stone in his hands. And Yahweh came down in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name Yahuwah. And Yahweh passed before him and proclaimed, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, an El, compassionate and showing favor, patient and great in loving commitment and truth, watching over loving commitment for thousands, forgiving crookedness and transgression and sin, but by no means leaving unpunished, visiting the crookedness of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. And Moshe hurried and bowed himself toward the earth and did obeisance and said, if now I have found favor in your eyes, O Yahuwah, I pray let Yahuwah go in our midst, even though we are stiff-necked people, and forgive our crookedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. And he said, see, I am making a covenant. Before all your people I am going to do wonders such have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall seek the work of Yahuwah. For what I am going to do with you is awesome. Guard what I command you today. See, I'm driving out from before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Guard yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you are going, lest it be a snare in your midst. But break down their slaughter places, smash their pillars, cut down their asherim. For do not bow yourselves to another mighty one, for Yahuwah, whose name is a jealous El, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they whore after their mighty ones, and slaughter to their mighty ones. And one of them invites you, and you eat of his slaughterings, and you take of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters whore after their mighty ones, and make your sons whore after their mighty ones. Do not make a molded mighty one for yourself. This shows up and plays itself out like exactly like he described in the book of Numbers. Total facepalm moment here. Enter the sorcerers. We always talk about these stinking priest class people behind the scenes. They're like, hey, does anybody know where the Pope is? Can he lead all the people astray, please? Enter here. Balum. Balum, the great sorcerer. Diviner. Numbers chapter 21 through 25 is some of the best chapters in the entire Bible, and from which we get warnings that are going to be important through the entirety of scriptures. We're warned about the doctrines of Balum. The doctrines of Balum are exactly what was just read about in Exodus 34, about sneakily leading the people into whoredom, eating food sacrificed to idols, to these immortals, yoking yourselves to these other gods, and then getting Yahuwah to just utterly destroy you because of it. Numbers is the textbook example of that story played out. At the very end, the last book here, the book that we're promised, the fifth gospel, Revelation, he says, the doctrines of Balum. We'll read Balum first so you get an idea. But this is what it is. He was a great sorcerer he coveted riches. He coveted the wages of divination. He wanted wealth and power, accolades, recommendations. He wanted the thumbs up, the likes, and the subscribes to his channel. He wanted all that stuff and was willing to do whatever it took to get there, including leading the people astray and into whoredom in order to accomplish it. Be on your guard, because there's a lot of masquerading ministers out there who are apostles of the devil. Just saying. Oh. Numbers 20. Oh, no, we'll go back a little bit. This is the talkie-knockie story. If you guys haven't heard it, I've read it quite a few times, but I'm going to just jump into Numbers 25 because this is where it comes to the head. Balum gets hired by the king of Moab with the houses filled with silver and gold, and all these princes, highly esteemed princes, come to him, and they're like, curse Israel. Curse them for us. Whoever you curse is curse. Whoever you bless is blessed. Curse them. This is what kings do. This is what presidents do, like Shriners. Harry S. Truman. He's like going to the priests in the Shriners Club. He's like, hey, we gotta curse these people. They're too moral. Let's blow up the nuclear family, shall we? Yes, let's do it. Dang it. It's these priests behind the scenes that are just wrecking shop. Anyways, Numbers chapter 3. Bamadabar. And Israel, so Balum agrees to go curse Israel. He's like, I'm only going to say what Yahweh tells me to say. So he goes there with the king of Moab. They go up onto this high mountain, and they do all the sacrifices, and they call out, and Yahweh answers Balum. And then Balum comes out, and he blesses Israel. He's like, I'm not going to go past the word of Yahweh. So he blesses them, goes to another place, blesses them again, goes to another place, blesses them again. The king of Moab, super ticked. He's like, I paid you all this stuff to come out here, curse my enemies, and instead you bless them. And so he's like, I'm not going to honor you. I would have esteemed you and honored you even more so, but instead you get none of it. Well, Balum didn't like that. So he ended up coming up with a different strategy. He's like, listen, here's how it works. In the kingdom of righteousness and the kingdom of darkness, kingdom of light and darkness, you have to transgress these commands. But if people are walking in obedience to Yahuwah, the enemy doesn't have a right to curse them. So if we can convince them to do the things that Yahuwah said not to do, then they'll be privy to the curses. So we got to lead them into sin. We got to lead them astray. By doing that, then we can let Yahuwah curse them. It'll be great. So this is his tactics here. Numbers 25. And Yisrael dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. And they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones, and the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. Thus Yisrael was joined to Baal Peor. That's the god of many holes. It's like how it translates. You can understand that. And the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Yisrael. And Yahweh said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people, hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Yisrael. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, each one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal Peor. And see, one of the children of Israel came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tent of the appointment. And when Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation, took a spear in his hand. He went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague among the children of Israel came to a stop, and those who died in the plague were 24,000. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was zealous with my zealousness in their midst, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my ardor, my zealousness. Therefore say, see, I am giving him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his seed after him a covenant of everlasting priesthood, because he was ardent, zealous for his Elohim, and made atonement for the children of Yisrael. And the name of the man of Israel who was struck with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, son of Salu, a leader of a father's house among the Shimonites. And the name of the Midianite woman who was struck was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur. And he was head of the people of the father's house in Midian. And Yahweh said to Moshe, saying, distress the Midianites, and you shall strike them, for they distressed you with their tricks, with which they deceived you in the matter of Peor, and the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of a leader of Midian, their sister, who was struck in the day of the plague because of Peor. These tricks, you must never underestimate the level of depravity of your enemy and their willingness to deceive you, trick you. They treat you like little children. And you know what? They do their utmost to raise you up in a misunderstanding about the reality of the world you live in at every level, so that you're easy to manipulate and you're easy to beguile and you're easy to control. That's literally what the government's function is in our societal structures, is to keep its citizens from truly walking in a deep understanding, so that they're easy to throw off balance and make them follow and be obedient subjects. That's their function. That's what they serve. It's because we are suffering the curse of horrible leadership. We need to pray and ask Yahuwah to work wonders to give us righteous leaders. And you know what? It starts with a leader of one. It starts with the man in the mirror. It starts with the woman in the mirror. It starts with us absolutely zealously going after the areas of our life where we have opened the door, where we have allowed the enemy to come in and sow the mines, fill us with destruction. As we root those areas out, as we destroy the strongholds of the devil, as we destroy these former ways of living, we grant Yahuwah the opportunity to open up for us his kingdom in our life. And you know what? Then we can turn our focus outside of our heart, outside of our home, outside. Until then, we must focus on that. Then, as we are able to, we can go out and begin to engage the adversary and then the kingdom warfare that's out there. But until then, we have to be very careful to not go beyond it, to not supersede the rules of engagement, because so many people get destroyed. They get their lives blown up by not following the rules of engagement. And you know what? That's why we have such power in prayer. That's why we can ask Yahweh to forgive the sins that are empowering this kingdom of darkness. Ask him to forgive the sins that are giving strength, power, finances, resources to the kingdom of darkness, that he would judge these immortals, that he would contend with these immortals who contend with us and our families and bring justice, that he would please raise up for us righteous leaders like Phinehas, who would be zealous to have zero tolerance of evil, that they would purge it from their midst. So many of you have opportunities to purge the evil from your midst, from your heart, from your home, from your job, or from your ministry. And you know what? That is our duty. That is our duty. And we must be really diligent to do these things. And by doing so, we will receive the blessings that are promised for doing this. He received a covenant of peace forever because he was zealous in that moment. His father did not. His father did not. He watched his father. Understand, Phineas watched his father fashion the idols, to carve, work with an engraving tool, diligently, deliberately took time to make these things look good, to lead the people into fornication. He led the people astray. He watched his dad do that. He could have followed after his dad. And you know what? Instead, he was set apart. He had two older brothers too. It's a tragedy in Aaron's side of the story. But this is what the benefit of reading the Torah is. You get an understanding of so much of what takes place. Nadab and Abihu, maybe we should read it real quick because it's brutal. Oh, it's horribly sad. His older brothers, you guys, they're literally going to dedicate the temple. They were supposed to be the priests that served with Aharon, their dad. Okay. They had the set apart garments placed upon them. They were literally preparing to go into like the true priesthood, like the greatest honor that any of them could have had. And instead they get drunk. They get drunk and they come before Yahuwah with strange fire. And he consumes them, knocks them dead. It's horrible. They're literally supposed to be dedicating the temple of Yahweh. It's like the greatest time. It's like going to be the greatest season of the entire story. And once again, we have this generational sin coming down off of the father onto the sons and them not standing up and resisting it. And so they get drunk with wine and they lose their guard. This is what alcohol has such a danger. It's such a pitfall. This is why literally after this story, they're like, listen, if you want to be priests, you want to be ministers in my house, don't ever drink wine in there. Don't get drunk in there. Do you understand? Not for you. That's why Proverbs 31 is there as a warning. He's like, hey, Lemuel, this king's mom is writing to him. She's like, not for you, O sovereign, not for you, O king, not for you to drink wine, nor desire strong drink, like not for princes. Don't do that. And I challenge you, if any of you guys are really trying to get super zealous about the kingdom, you really want to be all in to be a part of the remnant army of Yahweh, guard yourselves from the things that take you away from sobriety. I've had to. I'm not sitting here trying to preach from a highfalutin place. Believe me, it was a pitfall and a stronghold for me for many, many years of my life. It destroyed me. That was the minefield that I walked into voluntarily over and over and over and over and over again. It led me into great sins. It led me into worse sins constantly. It was a stronghold in my life, and I regret it terribly. I do. I do. And I wish I had more people that were zealous about explaining to me why we should guard ourselves, like why we should be sober minded, the benefits of being sober minded. I understand it's not wrong for people to drink alcohol. I'm not trying to say it's a sin to consume alcohol. If you're somebody that's trying to walk in this way, though, you need to be sober minded and vigilant because your devil, the devil, it says, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking those whom he may devour. Resist him firm in your faith. Like, that's why we're told to be sober, because we have a diligent enemy out there stalking us in the darkness, stalking us. I start my book with a story about Chelsea and I being out in the mountains, the foothills of Colorado, and having a lion, a mountain lion, coming and stalking us in the darkness. That feeling of a predator, of a very capable adversary stalking you in the darkness. That's what your adversary are. That's what these immortals are like. They are like a lion crouching out the door. Cain is warned. He's like, Cain is filled with wrath after Yahweh accepts the righteous offering of Abel and he rejects his. And it said his face fell, his countenance fell. And Yahweh comes to him and warns him. He's like, sin is crouching at the door. Resist it. Its desire is to rule over you, to have dominion over you. But he's like, you should have dominion over it. You should rule over it. But its desire is for you. That's that lion was sitting at the outside of that door. And instead of keeping the command, keeping the words written over the doorframe of his heart and over his life, he opened the door and he let murder consume him. He fell victim to the immortal of death. And you know what? So too have I. I have been a killer. I have been a murderer. It's a horrible bondage. It's bondage beyond your worst nightmare. Falling into that trap is a horrible snare. I don't want for anybody's life. I don't want for anybody. It's a horrible thing to have to deal with. And you know what? I pray to Yahuwah that you never have to go down that road. But you know what? Some of you that are watching this, you also have been there. And there's great healing and restoration that can come from it. But there's spiritual consequences to killing other people. There's spiritual consequences to yoking yourself sexually to other people. Those things have to be cast off. Those soul ties have to be severed, because there's a doorway between you and that person's funk, spiritually transmitted diseases after the fact. And you need deliverance from that, cleansing from that, and the shutting off of those doors so that there's no more legal grounds for the enemy to come in against you. These are those areas of our life that we have to diligently guard, diligently walk our way through, because until such a time, this stuff wages against us. And many of us lose horribly because of it, and our lives are blown apart. But you know what? This is why we have this good book. It's why we have these wonderful stories to keep us from it. We could learn from it and go from it. Let's go over to Revelation real quick here. This is in Revelation 2, the 5th gospel. And to the messenger of the assembly of Smyrna, right? Thus says the first and the last, Aleph and the Tav, who became dead and came to life. I know your works and your pressure and poverty, yet you are rich, and the blasphemy of those who say they are Yahudim and are not, but are a congregation of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. See, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison in order to try you, and you shall have pressure 10 days. Be trustworthy unto death, and I shall give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. He who overcomes shall by no means be harmed by the second death. Be an overcomer. And to the messenger of the assembly of Pergamos, right? He who has the sharp two-edged sword says this, I know your works and where you dwell, where the throne of Satan is. And you hold fast to my name and did not deny the belief in me, even in the days which Antipas was my trustworthy witness, who was killed near you, where Satan dwells. Understand something. He's talking about a literal place on the earth where the dragon dwelt. This means the dragon has literal thrones that he sits upon in the earth. These can be clearly found and identified. The people were not ignorant of them back then because they understood how to have spiritual eyes to look at physical problems. We likewise can terrain map our adversaries, these immortals, and where their territories are. The nations are divided according to 72 of these principalities. Yahweh chose one in one nation. Well, then there's all these other territories of all these other mighty ones, like the Prince of Persia. Satan, the dragon, has a throne, and he sets it up in a place. And you know what he brings before him? The blood of the righteous. That's what he has spilled there, like Zechariah, who was slaughtered between the set apart place and the most set apart place. Like these blood of all these righteous brothers and sisters of our faith has been spilled on the altars of these immortals from the very beginning. And that blood has fueled their kingdom, and it cries out and testifies a witness against them day and night. And you know what? That blood will be required of them. That blood, that sin guilt would be ascribed to Azazel. It says this in the script in the Torah. That blood guilt will be ascribed to Azazel. It's literally one of the names of those immortals that rebelled and came down on Hermon. Guilt is going on him for this. It's a serious deal. But I hold a few matters against you because you adhere, because you have there those who adhere to the teachings of Balum, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat food offered to idols, and to commit whoring. So you also have those who adhere to the teachings of the Nicolaitans, which teaching I hate. Repent, or else I shall come to you speedily and fight against them with the sword of my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assembly. To him who overcomes, I shall give him some of the hidden manna to eat, and I shall give him a white stone, and on the stone a renewed name, written which no one knows except him who receives it. This is such a good story, you guys. I encourage you to understand we must resist the teachings, the doctrines of Balaam that many are going to learn, that many are bowing down and submitting themselves to. They are the practices of divination, of whoring themselves out to these other gods. There are these false doctrines that are insidiously sown out into our midst to be stumbling blocks. People that are still eating food sacrificed to idols. Like when you look at a halal certification when it comes to animal products like meat, okay, when you see that certification, That's because they have a literal person, an Islamic priest, who stands there over the animal, turns them towards Mecca, and kills them in the name of Allah. That's food sacrificed to an idol. That's stuff that's polluting you. That's bringing an abomination into your temple. Don't do that. It says this plainly even in Acts 15. He's like, don't eat meat that's been animals that have been strangled. So like these are important things. What you put into your body really does affect you. Physically, what you eat, it actually does affect you. It'll abominate you guys. It's bringing a cursed thing into your house. This body is the house of Elohim. This is the temple. It's like somebody bringing in a pig into the temple and sacrificing it in the name of Zeus. This stuff still happens today all over the place. And the enemy put those minefields out there. So you'll go to the grocery store and you don't want to know, or you're ignorant by choice, by willingness is a huge deal. And you're like, I don't care. You know what? But it spiritually matters. If it spiritually matters, it has consequences. And so if you're trying to get out of this, you want to be more set apart to Yahweh. This is the stuff that should give you zealousness to take a spear and run it through the enemy's tactics, that you will have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose and reprove them. So when you find that genetically altered stuff, he's like, don't eat that stuff. Don't bring it into your body. It's going to change you out of the image that Yahweh made you to be. It's augmenting you. So be on guard against it. Diligently guard your house, guard your children, so that you would not be led astray by it, so that you would not be taken captive by the enemy to do his desires. All right, you guys. I love you so much. I'm so appreciative of each and every one of you and your relentless support. Thank you guys for that. And your prayers, your fervent prayers for me, my family, for ministry. Pray for the wounded and the weary and the oppressed. Pray for the deliverance of the nations. Pray that the scales that have been upon the eyes of people would be pulled off of them, and that people would be able to come to know the Father. They would come to know the Son, and that they would be transformed and born again into his kingdom, that we could see the kingdom of Yahweh advance, that the sons of righteousness would arise. They'd waken from their slumber, and that they would cast off the vanities of this world, and they would be zealous, bold, and courageous, that they'd pick up the spear of zealousness like Phinehas, and they would drive out the evil from their midst. I hope you live courageously, you guys, every single day of your life. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon.